my God. He is sucking on the dude. Yo! Oh, God. Yo! I'm saying it. Woo! We are going into, oh boy, big news, Vladimir Putin, big news, oh boy. The interview is up. The Vladimir Putin interview is 2 hours long. I'm not watching all hours of this, by the way. That's crazy, dude. But we will watch some of it. Okay, we'll see. If it's fire, I'll watch all of it. Who knows? All right, let's get to Vladdy Poo being glazed up by the King Glazer himself, Tucker Carlson.
Is an interview with the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, shot February 6, 2024 at about 7 p.m. in the building behind us, which is, of course, the Kremlin. The interview, as you will see if you watch it, is primarily about the war in progress, the war in Ukraine, how it started, what's happening, and most pressingly, how it might end. One note before you watch. At the beginning of the interview, we asked the most obvious question, which is, why did you do this? Did you feel a threat, an imminent physical threat? And that's your justification. And the answer we got shocked us. Putin went on for a very long time, probably half an hour, about the history of Russia going back to the 8th century. And honestly, we thought this was a filibustering technique and found it annoying and interrupted him several times. And he responded he was annoyed by the interruption. But we concluded in the end, for what it's worth, that it was not a filibustering technique. There was no time limit on the interview. We ended it after more than 2 hours. Instead, what you're about to see seemed to us sincere, whether you agree with it or not. Vladimir Putin believes that Russia has a historic claim to parts of Western Ukraine. So our opinion would be to view it in that light, as a sincere expression.
Vladimir Putin believes sincerely that he has a historic claim to parts of not Eastern, Western Ukraine? Is that a misspeak? Or is this motherfucker on crack cocaine? Oh my Lord.
Of what he thinks. And with that, here it is. Mr. President, thank you. On February 22nd, 2022, you addressed your country in a nationwide address when the conflict in Ukraine started. And you said that you were acting because you had come to the conclusion that the United States, through NATO, might initiate a, quote, surprise attack on our country. And to American ears, that sounds paranoid. Tell us why you believe the United States might strike Russia.
Dude, I've seen Vladimir Putin in such limited ways that immediately when I see him in a situation like this, my mind goes to that TikTok Vladimir Putin that's always like hitting the nuclear button on the White House, like dancing with the skibbity dope guy. Like it feels like it's not real. It feels like he's not the guy. That this is the Vladimir Putin impersonator that's gonna start dancing. You know what I'm talking about? You have to know the Vladimir Putin body double guy, like
out of the blue. How did you conclude that?
It's not that America, the United States, was going to launch a surprise strike on Russia. I didn't say that. Are we having a talk show or a serious conversation?
Here's the quote. Thank you. It's a formidable series.
Oh my God. He is sucking on the pee-pee, dude. Yo! Yo! Oh, God. Yo! Oh, Jesus Christ.
Because your basic education is in history, as far as I understand.
Yes.
So if you don't mind, I will take only 30 seconds or 1 minute to give you a short reference to history for giving you a little historical background.
Please.
Let's look where our relationship with Ukraine started from. Where did Ukraine come from? The Russian state started gathering itself as a centralized statehood, and it is considered to be the year of the establishment of the Russian state in 862, when the townspeople of Novgorod invited a Varangian prince.
Bro, are you for real, dude? Are you for really real? That's insane that we are, bro, he's like, let me tell you how we were a gas cloud, okay? Let me tell you about the Big Bang. You can't just, dude, he's doing Russ lore dumps.
Rurik from Scandinavia to reign. In 1862, Russia celebrated the 1000th anniversary of its statehood.
Oh my God, he's literally doing Israel. Oh my God, he's doing Netanyahu Israel shit. It's so funny. Oh God, this is why I love like Ukrainian flag, Israeli flag in the bio guys who just like don't realize that what Vladimir Putin is doing is literally like it's Israel shit.
And in Novgorod, there is a memorial dedicated to the 1000th anniversary of the country. In 882, Rurik's successor, Prince Oleg, who was actually playing the role of regent at Rurik's younger son, because Rurik had died by that time, came to Kiev. He ousted two brothers who
He's doing that because Ukraine is stealing Russian history live. He has to explain why it's wrong.
apparently had once been members
Yeah, the Russian claimed that the Kievan Rus were Russian. By that logic, Ukraine can claim Russia too. Turn it into a real... Why do you keep comparing Russia to Israel? What the fuck? First of all, are you familiar with both of these countries? Fuck you mean? Comparing Russia to Israel is definitely not out of pocket at all. Okay? Also, Russia and Israel have a pretty solid relationship, despite the fact that Vladimir Putin is always like, oh yeah, I love Palestinians. Like, you know, a lot of Russians in Israel. Okay? So that's number one. Number two, he's literally doing like lore dumps and Russian mythology to justify his irredentist actions in Ukraine. Why do you keep comparing Russia to Israel? What the fuck? I'm Palestinian. Okay, so he has no real nationalist. Like, look, if you talk about being genuinely afraid of NATO or wanting to put forward a red line as a matter of national security, as a foreign adversary, that's one argument. If you make irredentist claims with like lore dumps about why you should actually invade Ukraine and take it over because technically, you know, that's your land, all right? Then yeah, you're doing directly IDF playbook shit. You're doing Israel propaganda to a T.
members of Rurik's squad. So Russia began to develop with two centers of power, Kiev and Novgorod. The next very significant date in the history of Russia was 988. This was the baptism of Russia, when Prince Vladimir, the great-grandson of Rurik, baptized Russia and adopted Orthodoxy, or Eastern Christianity. From this time, the centralized Russian state began to strengthen. Why? Because of the single territory, integrated economic ties, one and the same language, and, after the baptism of Russia, the same faith and rule of the prince. The centralized Russian state began to take shape. Back in the Middle Ages, Prince Yaroslav the Wise introduced the order of succession to a throne. But after he passed away, it became complicated for various reasons.
Okay.
The throne was passed not directly from father to eldest son, but from the prince who had passed away to his brother, then to his sons in different lines. All this led to the fragmentation and the end of Rus as a single state. There was nothing special about it. The same was happening then in Europe. But the fragmented Russian state became an easy prey to
Connor, this is the stuff that American media doesn't want you to know, I guess. Yeah, incredibly boring, convoluted arguments that don't make any fucking sense unless you're like completely one-sided on the issue. Like, this is what my fucking haters think I'm making a claim on like Taiwan with respect to China. Like, this is what they think I'm saying. When I talk about like Taiwan's historical significance or its inception, while still maintaining the position that if they truly want autonomy, then they deserve it. But I completely understand where the Chinese position comes from as far as like their own security interests. Okay, as America utilizes Taiwan as like a weapon against their foreign adversary, wields Taiwan and Taiwanese independence as a weapon against their foreign adversary, and why most people in Taiwan, while they do want independence, understand that the current order of business of economic cooperation is significantly better than anything else. This is what they think I mean when I talk about all this shit. They think I'm saying like, well, Taiwan is Chinese, and therefore it belongs to mainland China. Was the U.S. not doing that in Ukraine? Not saying that the invasion was justified? No, the U.S.'s utilization of Ukraine against Russia and claiming that they were going to bring Ukraine into NATO when they weren't actually ever really interested in bringing them into NATO, okay, is a way to inflame the tensions. But the goal is not to eat the bait, especially after you have already annexed Crimea. Anyway,
To the empire created earlier by King Khan. His successors, namely Batu Khan, came to Rus, plundered and ruined nearly all the cities. The southern part, including Kiev, by the way, and some other cities, simply lost independence, while northern cities preserved some of their sovereignty. They had to pay tribute to the horde, but they managed.
I'm precogging him blaming Ukraine's existence on Lenin. I mean, it's not, he's blamed Lenin before for
to
it.
preserve some part of their sovereignty. And then a unified Russian state began to take shape with its center in Moscow. The southern part of Russian lands.
That's wrong. The U.S. was never reluctant to bring Ukraine into NATO. Quite the contrary. Yeah, no, that's why Ukraine is currently in NATO and Article 5 was implemented, and that's why there's American troops currently fighting in a direct hot war with Russia. You're right. No, totally. When George W. Bush said we're going to bring Georgia and Ukraine into NATO on his way out in like the last month of his presidency, basically, that was and Russia's red lines on that matter. That totally was real and valid. You know, dog. For NATO to operate, you still need cooperation from European states to also vote in for new members. That even includes like ridiculous guys like Turkey, Erdogan, which are still easy to control, as Erdogan has also chirped about Sweden and Finland and then capitulated immediately. But the notion that they were going to not take seriously Russia's red lines and actually put Ukraine into NATO, fast track Ukraine into NATO, was always a ridiculous argument. The Russian argument would just be that the invasion was to prevent Ukraine joining NATO, except Ukraine wasn't joining NATO regardless because they had already successfully annexed Crimea,
including Kiev, began to gradually gravitate.
By the way, none of what we just talked about, everything that we just talked about is related to obviously Russia's invasion of Ukraine and why it's unjustifiable. And none of what Vladimir Putin has talked about so far is even, in my opinion, remotely related to them invading Ukraine. Unless, as liberals have clearly stated time and time again in their Yaponomics sessions, that Vladimir Putin is irredentist, Vladimir Putin is imperialist, Vladimir Putin does want Ukraine. And he's basically saying, yeah, no, I do actually. They weren't lying. On God, I want Ukraine. I'm so horny for Ukraine.
Towards another magnet, the center that was emerging in Europe. This was the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. It was even called the Lithuanian-Russian Duchy, because Russians were a significant part of this population. They spoke the old Russian language and were Orthodox. But then there was a unification, the union of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania and the Kingdom of Poland. A few years later, another union was signed, but this time already in the religious sphere. Some of the Orthodox priests became subordinate to the Pope. Thus, these lands became part of the Polish-Lithuanian state.
Vladimir Putin. He is yap-maxing.
During decades, the Poles were engaged in Polonization of this part of the population. They introduced their language there, tried to entrench the idea that this population was not exactly Russians, that because they lived on the fringe, they were Ukrainians.
Ukraine wasn't joining NATO anyway because there was a war in the east and in occupied areas, which literally stops it becoming a member state. Until that's resolved. It couldn't join since 2014. So claiming it will join in 2022 is just a justification as a justification as a pure lie. No, I know that. I recognize that, which is why I'm saying that it was ridiculous that Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine to begin with. And I'm also following up on that and saying that it's also gross on the Western side that they kept selling this tall tale to the Ukrainian population. They were like, come on, go die, go die, go die in defense of Ukraine. We're going to get you, we're going to put, we're leading up to the last invasion. They were like, no, trust me, we're so going to give you NATO. You're going to be in NATO. Please, I promise you're going to be in NATO. It's bullshit. Why do you think he invaded Ukraine other than to keep their market and economy in the Russian market and prevent it becoming a EU subsidiary? I think he invaded Ukraine because he's he very openly is stating it. He's an idiot who personally thought that this would be the most effective way of dealing with any kind of Western involvement that Ukraine would have. Any kind of Western involvement that Ukraine would have, he would be able to like cut short. I also personally think that he greatly overestimated the air superiority that they would have. That's what I think. I think he thought we have air superiority, we'll overtake it, which was stupid from the jump. Like, it was always stupid. And I, as much as people say I'm a fucking Vladimir Putin dick rider, I stated very clearly, even before Russia invaded Ukraine and certainly after, that it was virtually impossible for the Russian military to permanently annex a country whose national identity is quite literally comprised, like the basic fundamentals of being a Ukrainian is about not being Russian, okay? Is about literally, even in certain instances, basically aligning with the Nazis like Bandera to not be Russian. 44 million people used to live in Ukraine before the invasion, okay? Their entire nationalist identity is comprised of not being Russian. There is no shot. There is no shot that they were going to be able to permanently annex, especially the Western areas. Okay? Most analysts agree. Everyone overemphasizes the effectiveness of Russia's massive air force, coupled with the fact that Russian strikes on the first days failed to destroy Ukraine's air defenses. Yeah, it's stupid. It was stupid. Why? Because Ukraine was fully supplied and filled with all different weapons? No, it was always stupid because it was impossible to permanently annex. It was impossible to permanently annex a country like that. Counterinsurge. Guys, look at fucking Gaza. Look at Gaza and Israel. Israel has a infinitely stronger military force with so much better weapons. And they, over the course of the past couple of months, have lost more military members in fucking Gaza than they did against fucking Lebanon over the course of years. Okay? Do you understand how devastating that shit is? You cannot do a fucking counterinsurgency in an urban environment against a population that has nowhere else to go and is going to fight tooth and fucking nail. This is no longer like war is no longer like, oh, you get your legionnaires out there, they get their legionnaires and you fucking fight in the open field. And then the rest is just peasantry that you roll over with your cavalry. And then now it's your territory. It doesn't work like that anymore. Okay. You got dudes buying drones off of Alibaba and dropping grenades on top of like Russian military positions while filming it and posting it off subreddits. Like, what are we talking about? There is as much advancement as we've seen in the field of modern war. There's also a democratization effect in the form of like Bayraktars, for example. Anyway, like, think about Vietnam, think about Afghanistan 1, think about Afghanistan 2, Afghanistan 1 with the USSR, Afghanistan 2 with the United States of America. It's just like, it seems that people don't understand. They think like, no, my dad can beat up your dad. My dad's dick is bigger than your dad's dick. And that's how things work. If that's how things work, then America would literally, you know, America would have built one massive McDonald's on Afghanistan and called it a day. Anyway, it's ridiculous. Wait, what did you say? The live stream I was watching just went down on YouTube, so you'd probably be next. Wait, why? This is not like, this is perfectly valid to watch. That's ridiculous. What? Anyway, let's continue.
Originally, the word Ukrainian meant that the person was living on the outskirts of the state, along the fringes, or was engaged in a border patrol service. It didn't mean any particular ethnic group. So the Poles were trying to, in every possible way, to colonize this part of the Russian lands and actually treated it rather harshly, not to say cruelly. All that led to the fact that this part of the Russian lands began to struggle for their rights. They wrote letters to Warsaw demanding that their rights be observed and people be commissioned here, including to Kiev.
I beg your pardon, can you tell us what period, I'm losing track of where in history we are, the Polish oppression of Ukraine?
It was in the 13th century. Now I will tell you what happened later, and give the dates so that there is no confusion. And in 1654, even a bit earlier, the people who were in control of the authority over that part of the Russian lands addressed Warsaw, I repeat, demanding that they send them to rulers of Russian origin and Orthodox faith. When Warsaw did not answer them, and in fact rejected their demands, they turned to Moscow, so that Moscow took them away. So that you don't think that I'm inventing things. I'll give you these documents.
Well, it doesn't sound like you're inventing it. I'm not sure why it's relevant to what happened.
Bro, he's like, he has to fake it so hard. Dude, he fakes it harder than Chat's mom every night. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, you brought a document. Or maybe he thinks the document is like laced or something.
But still, these are documents from the archives, copies. Here are the letters from Bogdan Khmelnytsky, the man who then controlled the power in this part of the Russian lands that is now called Ukraine. He wrote to Warsaw demanding that their rights be upheld. And after being refused, he began to write letters to Moscow, asking to take them under the strong hand of the Moscow Tsar. There are copies of these documents. I will leave them for your good memory. There is a translation into Russian. You can translate it into English later. Russia would not agree to admit them straight away, assuming that the war with Poland would start. Nevertheless, in 1654, the Pan-Russian Assembly of top clergy and landowners, headed by the Tsar, which was the representative body of the power of the old Russian state, decided to include a part of the old Russian lands into Moscow Kingdom. As expected, the war with Poland began. It lasted 13 years, and then in 1654...
I like what he's doing. I think we should... when all else fails, you can always blame Poland, okay? And, you know, that's not the worst idea.
A truce was concluded. And 32 years later, I think, a peace treaty with Poland, which they called Eternal Peace, was signed. And these lands, the whole left bank of Dnieper, including Kiev, went to Russia. And the whole right bank of Dnieper remained in Poland. Under the rule of Catherine the Great, Russia reclaimed all of its historical lands, including in the south and west. This all lasted until the revolution.
For the record, like, I not to be super libbed up here, but this is one area where liberals are vindicated when they talk about like how, oh, he's just like a Duginist. He's like repeating Alexander Dugin. But if this is his justification for invading Ukraine, then yes, the liberals are actually correct that this is just simply pure irredentist action that he believes is justified due to the historical reasons as to why Ukraine is actually a part of Russia.
Before World War...
this is straight up blood and soil shit.
For one, Austrian General Staff relied on the ideas of Ukrainianization and started actively promoting the ideas of Ukraine and the Ukrainianization. Their motive was obvious. Just before World War I, they wanted to weaken the potential enemy and secure themselves favorable conditions in the border area. So the idea which had emerged in Poland that people residing in that territory were allegedly not really Russians, but rather belonged to a special ethnic group, Ukrainians, started being propagated by the Austrian General Staff. As far back as the 19th century, theorists calling for Ukrainian independence appeared. All those, however, claimed that Ukraine should have a very good relationship with Russia. They insisted on that. After the 1917 revolution,
Ukraine does not share culture with Russians? Of course it does, man. That's not what I'm saying. I mean, it's like that's not. It doesn't matter. That doesn't mean that he can go and you know, take it.
The Bolsheviks sought to restore the statehood, and the civil war began, including the hostilities with Poland. In 1921, peace with Poland was proclaimed, and under that treaty, the right bank of Dnieper River once again was given back to Poland. In 1939, after Poland cooperated with Hitler, it did collaborate with Hitler, you know? Hitler offered Poland peace and a treaty of friendship.
Israelis don't share culture with the Palestinians because they're from Europe? Yeah, dude, totally. Every Israeli is from Europe. What are you talking about, dude? There's hella Arab Jews. So many people who are like technically pro-Palestinian literally don't understand a very important aspect of this, okay? No, there is a lot of Israeli people that are classified as Jewish and therefore not Arab, not seen as Arab in the eyes of the Israeli government, even though they're Arab Jews, which means, yes, they do have a shit ton of shared culture. It's actually the majority too. So no, it's not Palestinian citizens of Israel either. I'm not talking about the 22% Arab Christians and Arab Muslims. I'm talking specifically about Arab Jews that are classified as Jewish, Mizrahi and Sephardi, especially Sephardi in Israel. Or yeah, Mizrahi and Sephardi, not Sephardi especially. Sorry, Mizrahi especially.
An alliance demanding in return that Poland give back to Germany the so-called Danzig corridor, which connected the bulk of Germany with East Prussia and Königsberg. After World War I, this territory was transferred to Poland, and instead of Danzig, a city of Dansk emerged. Hitler asked them to give it amicably, but they refused.
Of course.
Still, they collaborated with Hitler and engaged together in the partitioning of Czechoslovakia.
But may I ask you, you're making the case that Ukraine, certainly parts of Ukraine, Eastern Ukraine, is in effect Russia has been for hundreds of years. Why wouldn't you just take it when you became president 24 years ago? You have nuclear weapons, they don't. If it's actually your land, why did you wait so long?
I'll tell you. I'm coming to that. This briefing is coming to an end. It might be boring, but it explains many things.
Just don't know how it's relevant.
Good. Good. I'm so gratified that
Dude, Tucker said, come on, man, wrap it up, which is crazy. You can't say that. You cannot say, quit your yapping unless you are unless you are playing such a profoundly important role as like a Western mouthpiece for Russia. There's no shot you can get away with saying that to Vladimir Putin, I feel like. Bro, while Tucker Carlson's having this conversation, just so people understand, there are American journalists that are in prison. There are Russian journalists in prison in Russia. There are obviously real spies that are also American spies that are in prison in Russia as well. But like, there are people who should definitely not be in prison in Russia for the crime of doing actual journalism. Okay. There are also, I'm not talking about like Paul Whelan. All right. Mr. Passport aficionado. I'm talking like straight up the Wall Street Journal guy, for example. There's like, is the Wall Street Journal guy, the Evan Greer or whatever his name is, like that. There are dudes who are Evan Gershkovich. There are dudes who should not be in prison that are in prison in Russia for doing journalism, for literally doing what Tucker Carlson claims no one is doing in Russia. Okay? That I think is like pretty fucked up. Obviously, when you look at it from the perspective of like all the CNN journalists have like turned a blind eye to the death and destruction that fell upon every Arab journalist in the region since Israel decided to do ethnic cleansing, right? In Gaza, they're being kind of phony when they go, oh, look at all these journalists. But like, I'm not. I do think that you can't prosecute journalists like that. Okay? You can't do that. You can't kill journalists like Israel's doing. You can't prosecute and criminalize journalism like Russia has done. It's fucked up.
You appreciate that. Thank you. So, before World War II, Poland collaborated with Hitler, and although it did not yield to Hitler's...
Yeah, we do it too, by the way. Yeah, of course. Of course we do it too. Edward Snowden, Chelsea Manning, Julian Assange, and you know, Ukraine does a different version of this as well. Like, don't get me wrong. They do it too. Everybody does it, but I still think it's wrong and bullshit.
Demands, it still participated in the partitioning of Czechoslovakia together with Hitler, as the Poles had not given the Danzig corridor to Germany and went so far, pushing Hitler to start World War II by attacking them. Why was it Poland against whom?
Turkey's jailing so many journalists. You say nothing about that. Yeah, I famously never talk about Erdogan being super hardcore anti-freedom of speech. Yeah, that's why I go back to Turkey all the time, famously. That's why I don't have a famous story about writing for the Huffington Post about the Turkish coup and how, I was threatened personally through an intermediary about not writing for Turkey at all. Thank you, though, chatter. Baram DD, Turkey's jailing so many journalists. You say nothing about that. What's next? They're going to be like, oh, you never talk about the Armenian genocide, you dumb piece of shit. Why are my haters so goddamn stupid where they immediately go, he's Turkish. He would never talk shit about Turkey. Suck my dick, dumbass. What have you done? What sacrifices have you made in your life? You know what I mean? I get death threats on a goddamn basis for the shit that I say. How dare you? I can't even go back to Turkey safely. And you're over here talking this big shit with no knowledge prior. How dare you address the allegations, bud? Yeah, okay. What's happening here? What are we doing? Top of the hour ad breaks? It's not top of the hour. It's middle of the hour.
The war started on 1st September 1939, Poland turned out to be uncompromising, and Hitler had nothing to do but start implementing his plans with Poland. By the way, the USSR, I have read some archive documents, behaved very honestly. It asked Poland's permission to transit its troops through the Polish territory to help Czechoslovakia. But the then Polish foreign minister said that if the Soviet planes flew over Poland, they would be downed over the territory of Poland. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that the war began, and Poland fell prey to the policies it had pursued against Czechoslovakia, as under the well-known Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Part of the territory, including western Ukraine, was to be given to Russia. Thus, Russia, which was then named the USSR, regained.
There ain't no fucking way he's using Molotov-Ribbentrop as like as a good thing. Like, no shot, right? He's like, no, it was actually really good. Like, it was really chill when Nazi Germany gave the USSR Ukraine.
In its historical lands. After the victory in the Great Patriotic War, as we call World War II, all those territories were ultimately enshrined as belonging to Russia, to the USSR. As for Poland, it received, apparently in compensation, the lands which had originally been German. The eastern parts of Germany. These are now western lands of Poland. Of course,
Centrist Jesus Charlie on an alt-right arc when it comes to not genociding Palestinians? What? Dude, come
Poland
on.
regained access to the Baltic
We're being serious right
Sea
now.
and Danzig,
Take a week off.
which was once again given its Polish name. So this was how this situation developed. In 1922, when the USSR was being established, the Bolsheviks started building the USSR.
Chat validates everything, dude. Come on, Hasan, you think Charles is going to talk about Palestinians? No. But I also didn't understand how you could be alt-right in defense of Israel. That's what I was like trying to comprehend what the fuck that person was saying. Don't validate him, Chad. Come on, that wasn't even good. You're saluting mid. When you salute mid, you want more mid. Did you buy this interview, lol? No, it's free.
And established the Soviet.
The interview is free for all to watch because this is a profoundly important work of journalism, according to Tucker Carlson. He
Ukraine,
wants
which had
everybody to
never
see it.
existed before.
Right.
Stalin insisted that those republics be included in the USSR as autonomous entities. For some inexplicable reason, Lenin, the founder of the Soviet state, insisted that they be entitled to withdraw from the USSR. And again, for some unknown reasons, he transferred to that newly established.
bro, he's like this one shitting on Lenin while also hyping up Stalin, shitting on Lenin for like talking about Ukrainian autonomy while hyping up Stalin, while also being a rugged anti-communist. He hits like every wrong aspect of the story. He even talked about how Germany gave Ukraine to the USSR. So technically, like how Hitler gave Ukraine to the USSR, so it's technically theirs. It's like, what is he trying to do? He's trying to make a historical argument from literally all of the worst points that you can make. Do you think he's a Nazball? No, man. What are you talking about? He's a hyper nationalistic capitalist oligarch. The idea that he is like, even in any way, shape, or form. I talked about this before. The only reason why Vladimir Putin even remotely mentions the USSR in a relatively positive terms is because he, like a lot of Russian boomers, does not give a shit about communism. He is literally he's a capitalist charlatan from the jump. He only cares about Russia having like this mythology of power, like a Russian empire. Okay, that's it. He just wants Russia to be a global superpower, and that is the only reason why he cares about the USSR. He does not care about the USSR. He is the reason why he is in power is because of the illegal dissolution of the USSR, which he participated in. Okay? He does not give a fuck about that beyond the actual legacy. There is no like ideological goals there. There's no agenda for any kind of like communist restoration project. He just cares about it as like it was a mighty power. It was a mighty power. There was a global superpower. It competed with the United States of America, and that's it. He wants to have a role in a multipolar world. That's it.
The Soviet Republic of Ukraine some of the lands together with people living there, even though those lands had never been called Ukraine, and yet they were made part of that Soviet Republic of Ukraine. Those lands included the Black Sea region, which was received under Catherine the Great, and which had no historical connection with Ukraine whatsoever. Even if we go as far back as 1654, when these lands...
Shitting on Lenin and supporting Stalin is the most basic stance. As you said, it should be the opposite, by the way. Be promoting Stalin, or not promoting Stalin. It should be promoting Lenin and like criticizing Stalin for, a lot of his mishandlings, and yet he does the exact opposite because he is not even remotely pro-socialist. It's not about socialism for him at all. There's no like ideological purpose beyond this restoration of the USSR outside of land ownership. But yeah, as you said, boomer capitalists and nationalists rule the country. Source M. Russian.
Lands returned to Russian Empire. That territory was the size of 3 to 4 regions of modern Ukraine, with no Black Sea region. That was completely out of the question.
In 1654.
Exactly.
You obviously have encyclopedic knowledge of this region, but why didn't you make this case for the first 22 years as president that Ukraine wasn't a real country?
The Soviet Union was given a great deal of territory that had never belonged to it, including the Black Sea region. At some point, when Russia received them as an outcome of the Russo-Turkish Wars, they were called New Russia or Novorossiya. But that does not matter. What matters is that Lenin, the founder of the Soviet state, established Ukraine that way. For decades, the Ukrainian Soviet Republic developed as part of the USSR. And for unknown reasons again, the Bolsheviks were engaged in Ukrainianization. It was not merely because the Soviet leadership was composed to a great extent of those originating from Ukraine. Rather, it was explained by the general policy of indigenization pursued by the Soviet Union. Same things were done in other Soviet republics. This involved promoting national languages and national cultures, which is not bad in principle. That is how the Soviet Ukraine was created. After the World War II, Ukraine received, in addition to the lands that had belonged to Poland before the war, part of the lands that had previously belonged to Hungary and Romania. So Romania and Hungary had some of...
Is he saying like Russification was a good thing, was a good policy? Because it was not a good policy. It was actually objectively a bad policy. Like it didn't work. It failed. He's saying the opposite. I didn't understand. Maybe he was saying. He says that the Russification didn't happen. Oh, he said the Soviets did the opposite of Russification. Oh, yeah, no, totally.
Of their lands taken away and given to the Soviet Ukraine, and they still remain part of Ukraine. So in this sense, we have every reason to affirm that Ukraine is an artificial state that was shaped at Stalin's will.
Do you believe Hungary has a right to take its land back from Ukraine and that other nations...
He's complaining that Lenin preserved Ukraine. Well, I mean, if you're going to talk about like 2,000 years of like Kievan Rus or whatever, Kievan Rus or Ukrainian history and how it's actually Russian from the jump, then Russification should not even matter because they are Russian technically, right? Like, how are you going to maintain the position that both like there is no autonomous Ukrainian identity, they're all Russian, while simultaneously saying, well, Russification didn't really work, and it was actually all of the minority, or not minority, what is it, like secondary alt-comedic in Turkish? We have this term in Turkey. I don't know what it's called. It's like your secondary identity, I guess. When you're like a former empire, you have a lot of ethnicities that are now Turkish or that are now Russian, but I guess technically they would have like a secondary ethnicity as well. Like that would not exist for Ukraine if they were already Russian. So it wouldn't matter what Lenin thought about.
Nations have a right to go back to their 1654 borders?
I'm not sure whether they should go back to the 1654 borders. But given Stalin's time, so-called Stalin's regime, which as many claim saw numerous violations of human rights and violations of the rights of other states,
Wait, now he's shitting on Stalin?
one may say that they could claim back those lands of theirs while having no right to do that. It is at least understandable.
Have you told Viktor Orban that he can have part of Ukraine?
Never. I have never told him, not a single time. We have not even had any conversation on that, but I actually know for sure that Hungarians who live there wanted to get back to their historical land. Moreover, I would like to share a very interesting story with you. I digress. It's a
Bro, this is why I hate talking about Syria, but also hate talking about fucking Russia-Ukraine shit. Look. Putin making anti-Semitic conspiracies about Ukrainians instead of Jews. This guy, he's also a liar. Eastern Ukraine was anarcho-primitivist and part of the Hetmanate before the Muscovite settler colonials moved in under Catherine the Great. Actually, Russia is Ukrainian since the first Rus was Kievan. Actually, according to this, Russia is Ukrainian since the first Rus was Kievan Rus. And now he's saying, correct, Kiev was the origin of Orthodox civilization in Slavic lands. Moscow was a swamp then. Everyone is going into deep lore for no reason, okay? Russia is Russia. Ukraine is Ukraine. That's it. Leave it as is. You don't have to get to like paradox gaming conspiracies and map making in the chat as you write out paragraphs. Unless you're Moldovan Mama Liga, in which case you are allowed because all of Russia belongs to Moldova. Everybody knows this, and except for Crimea, which belongs to Turkey. Everybody also knows this. Give Crimea back to the Tatars so it can be a part of the Turkish Khanate. Once again, the Golden Horde will rise up. As you guys know, I am an Islamist fundamentalist caliphate defender who wants to restore Sharia law globally, specifically in the United States of America, as a fifth column style infiltrator. And son of oligarchs, private jet lover, what else? Yeah, secretly a neo-Ottomanist as well. Let's continue.
Personal one. Somewhere in the early 80s, I went on a road trip in a car from then Leningrad across the Soviet Union through Kiev. Made a stop in Kiev.
Why are you pretending that you disagree with your buddy Vladimir? I used to support you, but you politically have changed. I'll be careful falling down this rabbit hole. The commissioner of the EU has considered levying financial sanctions against Tucker Carlson to the extent he now has to watch the ad break at the top of the hour. Come on, dog. There's no top of the hour yet. That's bullshit. That doesn't count. It's fucking 3:46, brother. That's insane.
And then went to Western Ukraine.
Bro, we are 21 minutes in. This dude is like barely getting to fucking World War II. Is it true that you chartered a private jet to the Burbank airport just to go to Portos? It's true.
I went to the town of Beregovoye, and all the names of towns and villages there were in Russian and in a language I did not understand, in Hungarian, in Russian and in Hungarian. Not in Ukrainian, in Russian and in Hungarian. I was driving through some kind of village and there were men sitting next to the houses and they were wearing black three-piece suits and black cylinder hats. I asked, are they some kind of entertainers? I was told, no, they were not entertainers, they're Hungarians. I said, what are they doing here? What do you mean? This is their land, they live here. This was during the Soviet time in the 1980s. They preserved the Hungarian language, Hungarian names, and all their national costumes. They are Hungarians and they feel themselves to be Hungarians. And of course, when now there is an infringement.
Well, that is, and there's a lot of that, though. I think many nations are upset about Transylvania as well, as you obviously know. But many nations feel frustrated by the redrawn borders of the wars of the 20th century.
Yeah, give it back to fucking Turkey, dog. Yapping around for no particular reason, okay? It all belongs to the Ottoman Empire. I've been saying this. I've been saying it, and yet for some reason people don't want to respect it, okay? It belongs to the Ottoman Empire, and that's why I'm going to do it. I'm going to be the guy who does it, okay? I am Vladimir Yapimir Putin.
And wars going back 1,000 years, the ones that you mentioned. But the fact is that you didn't make this case in public until 2 years ago, February. And in the case that you...
The Ottoman Empire? That's so bad. I've never even thought of that before. The Ottoman Empire, more like it. How dare you? How dare you? I'm fucking mad. Oh my God. The Ottoman Empire, unironically, is real. It's like that fucking, remember that Tanzimat era thing I used to have on my desktop that I would show you guys sometimes, of like the dudes doing a circle of ass fucking from the Ottoman era, like that poster, the gay butt fucking circle. That is the Ottoman Empire. True. He stole that joke from a Twitter account named Jihad al-Haq. Damn. The Ottoman Empire destroys the Byzantine Empire. I can't show you the actual butt fucking circle, but I used to have that shit directly on my desktop, like it's the fucking horse porn folder of a particular content creator next to my taxes. Oh, okay, let's continue.
Which I read today. You explain at great length that you felt a physical threat from the West in NATO, including potentially a nuclear threat, and that's what got you to move. Is that a fair characterization of what you said?
I understand that my long speeches probably fall outside
Oh my God, he is saying he's yapping. I'm yapping.
of the genre.
From the West in NATO, including potentially a nuclear threat, and that's what got you to move. Is that a fair?
Dude, Tucker Carlson's literally like, dog, stop talking about how you want Ukraine and Ukraine is yours. You wanted to do it because like NATO, right? Like that's the reason why you wanted to do it, because NATO, right? Please, dude, what are you doing? He's like, come on, just say you're doing it because of NATO. That's what you said before the interview. Why are you saying all this stuff about how Ukraine is Russian and how it's been 1,000 years of being Russian and how you must take it back?
Characterization of what you said?
Yeah, я понимаешь. I'm yapping. I know.
I understand that my long speeches probably fall outside of the genre of the interview. That is why I asked you at the beginning.
Yeah, he's saying yapping much.
Are we going to have a serious talk or a show? You said a serious talk. So bear with me, please. We're coming to the point where the Soviet Ukraine was established. Then, in 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. And everything that Russia had generously bestowed on Ukraine was dragged away by the latter. I'm coming to a very important point of today's agenda.
Thank you.
It is very telling that the first 23 minutes of him was literally talking for like 1,000 years of history, and like he hasn't even gotten to NATO yet. And Tucker had to like put him back on the rails and be like, you're doing it because of NATO, right? Like you're doing it because of NATO. And the only thing he talks about is like, oh, the dissolution of the USSR. It's just like, and that's when Ukraine
After all,
formed.
the collapse of the Soviet Union was effectively initiated by the Russian leadership.
Yeah, I wonder who in the Russian leadership effectively engaged in the collapse of the Soviet Union. Obviously, he would have nothing to do with that, right? I mean, Vladimir Putin himself, he would, that'd be real weird if he was, what a fake friend.
I do not understand what the Russian leadership was guided by at the time, but I suspect there were several reasons to think everything would be fine. First, I think that then Russian leadership believed that the fundamentals of the relationship between Russia and Ukraine were, in fact, a common language. More than 90% of the population there spoke Russian. Family ties. Every third person there had some kind of family or friendship ties. Common culture, common history. Finally, common faith, coexistence.
Hasan sounding like another tongue-bathing establishment mouthpiece, to be honest. Yes, famously, I love being a tongue-bathing establishment mouthpiece, which is precisely why I'm simultaneously called a Hamas terrorist, a dick writer for Iran, a dick writer for China, and even a dick writer for Vladimir Putin. Having a nuanced perspective on global conflicts means that I am, you know, that's it. I'm dick writing everybody, and simultaneously none at all. I'm actually dick writing Anderson Cooper and Jake Tapper.
Existence with a single state for centuries and deeply interconnected economies. All of these were so fundamental. All these elements together make our good relationships inevitable. The second point is a very important one. I want you, as an American citizen, and your viewers to hear about this as well. The former Russian leadership assumed that the Soviet Union had ceased to exist, and therefore there were no longer any ideological dividing lines. Russia even agreed voluntarily and proactively to the collapse of the Soviet Union, and believed that this would be understood by the so-called civilized West as an invitation for cooperation and association. That is what Russia was expecting, both from the United States and the so-called collective West as a whole. There were smart people, including in Germany, Egon Bahr, a major politician of the Social Democratic Party, who insisted in his personal conversations with the Soviet leadership on the brink of the collapse of the Soviet Union that a new security system should be established in Europe. Help should be given to unify Germany, but a new system should be also established to include the United States, Canada, Russia, and other Central European countries.
Is he talking about NATO now? Is that what it is? He like went back to post-World War II, I think. He talked about the dissolution of the USSR, and then like I can't keep track. Is he now going back to NATO? Because if he had started talking about NATO, if he started talking about NATO from the jump, yeah, he started talking about NATO. If he had started talking about NATO from the jump, he would have a better argument, in my opinion.
Yes.
One, because like Americans don't, the right is like, I guess, ostensibly isolationist, even though they would love NATO in principle. I think they just hate it because like Trump said he doesn't like it. Because I really don't understand why the right doesn't like NATO in general, because like it's everything that they love, just like destroying Libya. You know what I mean? I don't really know why. NATO is European, which is gay. Yeah, I don't think they understand what NATO is. That's why they kind of hate it, or they hate on it. Because of taxes. Yeah, it's so dumb. They don't really get it. Anyway.
But NATO needs not to expand. That's what he said. If NATO expands, everything would be just the same as during the Cold War, only closer to Russia's borders. That's all. He was a wise old man, but no one listened to him. In fact, he got angry once.
I guess this is why he had to describe like how Ukraine is Russia technically. Because if your only security concerns are NATO, then you can deal with that without invading Ukraine. But if your security concerns come from NATO, and on top of that, Ukraine is technically a Russian, then he can justify why he's just taking back his land and protecting his own people that are being oppressed by, the scary Ukrainian administration that's like Western dogs or something.
Said, you don't listen to me. I'm never setting my foot in Moscow once again. Everything happened just as he had said.
Well, of course, it did come true, and you've mentioned this many times. I think it's a fair point, and many in America thought that relations between Russia and the United States would be fine with the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War, that the opposite happened. But you've never explained why you think that happened, except to say that the West fears a strong Russia, but we have a strong China the West does not seem very afraid of.
What? Wait, the fuck do you mean? Tucker, what the hell are you saying, dude? The West does not fear a strong China? Brody, where is it? There's like one article about like how U.S. Army Special Forces on long-term basis being placed, Green Berets being stationed in the Republic of China's 101st Amphibious Reconnaissance Battalion on a long-term basis on Kinmen and Matsu. There's literally new defense positions opening up surrounding China. The notion that like America isn't trying to put the same stranglehold on China that it did on the USSR and then subsequently Russia is crazy. I mean, he's not completely wrong militarily. There's more fear against Russia than China since China is relatively inactive militarily. I guess there's that.
What about Russia, do you think, convinced policymakers they had to take it down?
The West is afraid of strong China more than it fears a strong Russia, because Russia has 150 million people and China has 1.5 billion population, and its economy is growing by leaps and bounds, or 5% a year. It used to be even more. But that's enough for China. As Bismarck once put it, potentials are the most important. China's potential is enormous. It is the biggest economy in the world today in terms of purchasing power parity and the size of the economy. It has already overtaken overtaking the United States quite a long time ago, and it is growing at a rapid clip. Let's not talk about who is afraid of whom. Let's not reason in such terms. And let's get into the fact that after 1991, when Russia expected that it would be welcomed into the brotherly family of civilized nations, nothing like this happened. You tricked us. I don't mean you personally when I say you. Of course, I'm talking about the United States. The promise was that NATO would not expand eastward, but it happened 5 times. There were 5 waves of expansion. We tolerated all that. We were trying to persuade them. We were saying, please don't. We are as bourgeois now as you are. We are market economy and there's no communist party.
I mean, this part is true. He's not wrong. He ain't wrong about that. I mean, worst guy to say that, but he's right. He's like, we're capitalists. We love capitalism. I love yapping just like you do. I hear, suka blyat, I hear Hasanabi serving top of the hour at break. He says he's socialist, yet he served ad break at top of the hour. What's that about? Your socialists are also just as bourgeois as we are. We love capitalism. If you no longer want to see those ads, use Amazon Prime. Connect to your Twitch Prime. Or by getting gifted a sub, if you are lucky. Dude, by the way, that accent is going to be coming back in a little bit when I'm defending the borders of Ojaristan, a not fictional nation, in a game I call Comrade Border Patrol, CBP. It is the 3-minute ad break now.
Let's negotiate. Moreover, I have also said this publicly before. There was a moment when a certain rift started growing between us. Before that, Yeltsin came to the United States. Remember, he spoke in Congress and said the good words. God bless America. Everything he said were signals. Let us in. Remember the developments in Yugoslavia before the Yeltsin was lavished with praise? As soon as the developments in Yugoslavia started, he raised his voice in support of Serbs, and we couldn't but raise our voices for Serbs in their defense. I understand that there were complex processes underway there. I do. But Russia could not help raising its voice in support of Serbs, because
Just Gump, thank you for the 20 gifted subs.
Serbs are also a special and close to us nation, with Orthodox culture and so on. It's a nation that has suffered so much for generations. Well, regardless, what is important is that Yeltsin expressed his support. What did the United States do? In violation of international law and the UN Charter, it started bombing Belgrade. It was the United States that let the genie out of the bottle. Moreover, when Russia protested and expressed its resentment, what was said? The UN Charter and international law have become obsolete. Now everyone invokes international law, but at that time they started saying that everything was outdated. Everything had to be changed. Indeed, some things need to be changed, as the balance of power has changed. It's true, but not in this manner. Yeltsin was immediately dragged through the mud, accused of alcoholism, of understanding nothing, of knowing nothing. He understood everything, I assure you. Well, I became president in 2000. I thought, okay, the Yugoslav issue is over, but we should try to restore relations. Let's reopen the door that Russia had tried to go through. And moreover, I said it publicly, I can't reiterate. At a meeting here in the Kremlin with the outgoing President Bill Clinton, right here in the next room, I said to him, I asked him, Bill, do you think if Russia asked to join NATO, do you think it would happen? Suddenly he said, you know, it's interesting. I think so. But indeed,
interesting. Yeah. Weird. Weird to be this like supposedly pro-socialist guy, Red Scare shit, while he's like very openly talking about his relationship with Bill Clinton.
The evening when we met for dinner, he said, you know, I've talked to my team. No, it's not possible now. You can ask him. I think he will watch our interview. He'll confirm it. I wouldn't have said anything like that if it hadn't happened. Okay.
Were you sincere?
It's impossible now.
Would you have joined NATO?
Look, I asked the question, is it possible or not? And the answer I got was no. If I was insincere in my desire to find out what the leadership position was...
But if he had said yes, would you have joined NATO?
If he had said yes, the process of rapprochement would have commenced, and eventually it might have happened, if we had seen some sincere wish on the other side of our partners. But it didn't happen. Well, no means no. Okay, fine.
Why do you think that is? Just to get to motive, I know you're clearly bitter about it, I understand, but why do you think the West rebuffed you then? Why the hostility? Why did the end of the Cold War not fix the relationship? What motivates this from your point of view?
You said I was bitter about the answer. No, it's not bitterness. It's just a statement of fact. We're not bride and groom, bitterness, resentment. It's not about those kind of matters in such circumstances. We just realized we weren't welcome there, that's all. Okay, fine. But let's build relations in another manner. Let's look for common ground elsewhere. Why we received such a negative response, you should ask your leaders. I can only guess why. Too big a country with its own opinion and so on. And the United States, I've seen how issues are being resolved in NATO. I will give you another example now concerning Ukraine. The US leadership exerts pressure, and all NATO members obediently vote, even if they do not like something. Now, I'll tell you what happened in this regard with Ukraine in 2008, although it's being discussed. I'm not going to open a secret to you, say anything new. Nevertheless, after that we tried to build relations in different ways. For example, the events in the Middle East, in Iraq. We were building relations with the United States in a very soft, prudent, cautious manner. I repeatedly raised the issue that the United States should not support separatism or terrorism in the North Caucasus. But they continue to do it anyway. And political support, information support, financial support, even military support came from the United States and its satellites for terrorist groups in the Caucasus. I once raised this issue with my colleague, also the President of the United States. He says, "It's impossible. Do you have proof?" I said, "Yes." I was prepared for this conversation, and I gave him that proof. He looked at it, and you know what he said? I apologize, but that's what happened. I'll quote. He says, "Well, I'm gonna kick their ass." We waited and waited for some response. There was no reply. I said to the FSB director, "Write to the CIA, what is the result of the conversation with President?" He wrote once, twice, and then we got a reply. We have the answer in the archive. The CIA replied, "We have been working with the opposition in Russia. We believe that this is the right thing to do, and we will keep on doing it." Just ridiculous. Well, okay. We realized that it was out of the question.
Forces in opposition to you. So you're saying the CIA is trying to overthrow your government?
Of course, they meant in that particular case the separatists, the terrorists who fought with us.
Dude. There you go. You want this? You think this is readable? Okay,
In the
let's do
Caucasus.
it.
That's who they call the opposition. This is the second point. The third moment is a very important one. Is the moment when the US missile defense system was created. The beginning. We persuaded for a long time not to do it in the United States. Moreover, after I was invited by Bush Jr.'s father, Bush Sr., to visit his place on the ocean, I had a very serious conversation with President Bush and his team. I proposed that the United States, Russia, and Europe jointly create a missile defense system that, we believe, if created unilaterally, threatens our security, despite the fact that the United States officially said that it was being created against missile threats from Iran. That was the justification for the deployment of the missile defense system. I suggested working together, Russia, the United States, and Europe. They said it was very interesting. They asked me, "Are you serious?" I said, "Absolutely."
Let me ask, what year was this?
I don't remember. It is easy to find out on the internet when I was in the USA at the invitation of Bush Sr. It is even easier to learn from someone I'm going to tell you about. I was told it was very interesting. I said, just imagine if we could tackle such a global strategic security challenge together. The world will change. We'll probably have disputes, probably economic and even political ones, but we could drastically change the situation in the world. He says yes, and asks, "Are you serious?" I said, "Of course. We need to think about it," I'm told. I said, "Go ahead, please." Then Secretary of Defense Gates, former director.
I feel like he wants to be Israel so bad. Like, think about it. Like, if I'm to take everything he's saying at face value, okay, he kind of wants to be Israel. He's like, I want to be America's ally so I can do whatever the fuck I want. And I also want to take, I want to take Ukraine. I want to expand into Ukraine. Ukraine is mine. I have laid historic claim to Ukraine, okay? I'm literally your guy. Let me also participate in like this allegiance so I can just be, I can be your roll dog. Do you think you want to be like Turkey? No. Ain't nobody want to be like Turkey.
Of CIA and Secretary of State Rice came in here, in this cabinet, right here at this table. They sat on this table. Me, the foreign minister, the Russian defense minister on that side, they said to me, yes, we have thought about it. We agree. I said, thank God, great, but with some exceptions.
So twice you've described US presidents making decisions and then being undercut by their agency heads.
Why you hate your own kind? Wait, what? My own kind? Brother, talking about Turks like they're fucking a different species. Holy shit, dude. Least racist American guy.
So it sounds like you're describing a system that's not run by the people who were elected, in your telling.
That's right, that's right. In the end, they just told us to get lost. I'm not going to tell you the details because I think it's incorrect. After all, it was confidential conversation. But our proposal was declined, that's a fact. It was right then when I said, look, but then we will be forced to take countermeasures.
He's literally like, dog, why don't you want us to be like your, Russian Israel? We also blow up Muslim populations like all the time. Okay, we love blowing up Muslim populations. Like, come on, dog. Let me be your fucking Israel, homie. What the fuck?
We will create such strike systems that will certainly overcome missile defense systems. The answer was, we are not doing this against you, and you do what you want, assuming that it is not against us, not against the United States.
Why does his simping America make America look kind of weirdly Russophobic? I don't know what you mean by that.
I said, okay. Very well. That's the way it went. And we created hypersonic systems with intercontinental range, and we continue to develop them. We are now ahead of everyone. The United...
By the way, the interview is now, for me at least, becoming clear. The purpose of this interview is to be as sympathetic to, like, American Republicans as possible. That's why I said the Israel thing. Like, Republicans love Israel. And he's making Israel-ass arguments without the obvious, like, religious association that is also profoundly important for the evangelical Christianity side of things. And I feel like he's just trying to be like, look, I'm a small bean. I'm a small bean conservative nationalist. Like, you're a small bean conservative nationalist. Why don't we just, like, get it together? Because I was trying to figure out, like, what, obviously he wants to do propaganda, but his line of attack, like what his line of attack, like what his goals are here was interesting to me. And it seems like he's just trying to come across as, like, rational, reasonable, don't really even talk about, like, the atrocities in Ukraine. Don't even fucking talk about what the Ukrainians have done, right? Because, like, if he was making an argument internally, domestically, if he was making a similar argument to Tucker Carlson about the same argument that he makes domestically, he'd be talking about Ukraine and, like, how Ukrainians are so violent and so bad, and LPR and DPR has a bunch of Russians that they wouldn't allow to separate. But instead, he's like, I love America. I love linking up and building. And America doesn't want me to link up and build.
United States and the other countries in terms of the development of hypersonic strike systems, and we are improving them every day. But it wasn't us. We proposed to go the other way, and we were pushed back. Now, about NATO's expansion to the east. Well, we were promised no NATO to the east, not an inch to the east, as we were told. And then what? They said, well, it's not enshrined on paper, so we'll expand. So there were 5 waves of expansion, the Baltic states, the whole of Eastern Europe, and so on.
This is why people say I'm a Putin dick rider, by the way, because there are parts of what he's talking about that make total fucking sense, and nothing about, like, Ukraine being Russian or whatever. But as far as, like, NATO expansion goes, and that being seen as a genuine threat for Russia, yeah, of course, that makes total sense.
And now I come to the...
Especially post-USSR dissolution, when Russia literally is, in his own words, a capitalist lapdog, like, run by oligarchs that sold the country piecemeal to Western banks. So he's like, why the fuck can't we be friends, is what he's saying. Why are you still propping up NATO? Let me join NATO. Now, I don't know if he's, like, being serious about joining NATO or not, but he's basically saying, like, you're using NATO against me, but I'm your guy, which he was.
The main thing, they have come to the Ukraine, ultimately. In 2008, at the summit in Bucharest, they declared that the doors for Ukraine and Georgia to join NATO were open. Now about how decisions are made there. Germany, France seem to be against it, as well as some other European countries. But then, as it turned out later, President Bush, and he's such a tough guy, a tough politician, as I was told later, he exerted pressure on us and we had to agree. It's ridiculous, it's like kindergarten. Where are the guarantees? What kindergarten is this? What kind of people are these? Who are they? You see, they were pressed, they agreed. And then they say, Ukraine won't be in the NATO, you know? I say, I don't know. I know you agreed in 2008. Why won't you agree in the future? Well, they pressed us then. I say, why won't they press you tomorrow? And you'll agree again. Well, it's not.
One thing that I do find very funny is that, like, he's like, oh, well, why don't you put it in writing? This is a thing that, like, Americans also say about Russia, where they're like, well, Russia always reneges on, like, prior deals. Why could we trust them? And it's like, bro, you're America. Like, look at what Trump did with the Iran denuclearization agreement. And that's one of many different instances. We literally have a policy in China called strategic ambiguity, which is just a fancy word for lying. It's a fancy substitute for just lying and saying, no, you don't understand. It's one China. But also, we do believe that, we're going to keep arming and utilizing Taiwan as like a military base, a forward operating base directly into China. So American history, American foreign policy is filled with America writing up treaties or having handshake agreements that they do not follow through on. And the same, of course, goes for Russia as well. But it is ridiculous that we have this like one-sided approach in this situation where we're like, oh, it's only the Russians that violate agreements, when NATO expansion is correct. Like, it did happen time and time again. And it happened after the dissolution of the USSR as well. My opinion on it is that it happened because it is a moneymaker. It's a moneymaker. And Russia's existence, Russia's actions, Russia's existence is a way to perfectly continue justifying NATO and continue expanding NATO. That's it.
Nonsensical. Who's there to talk to? I just don't understand. We're ready to talk. But with whom? Where are the guarantees? None. So they started to develop the territory of Ukraine. Whatever is there, I have told you the background, how this territory developed, what kind of relations there were with Russia. Every second or third person there has always had some ties with Russia. And during the elections in already independent, sovereign Ukraine, which gained its independence as a result of the Declaration of Independence. And by the way, it says that Ukraine is a neutral state, and in 2008, suddenly the doors or gates to NATO were open to it. Oh, come on. This is not how we agreed. Now, all the presidents that have come to power in Ukraine, they relied on electorate with a good attitude to Russia in one way or the other. This is the southeast of Ukraine. This is a large number of people. And it was very difficult to dissuade this electorate, which had a positive attitude towards Russia. Viktor Yanukovych came to power, and how? The first time he won after President Kuchma, they organized a third round, which is not provided for in the constitution of Ukraine. This is a coup d'etat. Just imagine someone in the United States.
All those sovereign countries shouldn't have the right to join NATO. Hasan Piker. Oh, God, dude. Come on, brother. Jesus Christ. It is literally a protection racket. Stop playing with me. Oh my God. I already ran the top of the hour break if you're trying to fucking do this. Yeah, it's always a voluntary association. Yes, countries want weapons. Okay, they like having guns. America sells them. Okay, America gives them to you when you join NATO. Great. It's still bad. It's also additionally funny because it's contentious with the supposed socialists that claim to be socialist, and then they dick ride NATO. It makes no sense. It is an institution designed to eviscerate socialism and communism. It was directly created. It was directly created to reinforce American hegemony and set up a protection racket. Sometimes for valid reasons, but other times specifically to create a self-reinforcing cycle of steady flow of weapons and assets changing hands in that process from Europe back to America and vice versa. Literally hired actual Nazis and actual fascists in every fucking country that it existed in and it operated in, destabilized quietly all of the European nations that it operated in, from Italy to Germany. Well, Germany was a little bit more willing, West Germany specifically, and everywhere else. Okay. And it's like hidden under the guise of, see, this is the problem. Would you consider NATO expansion as colonial conquest? It's not actual straight up colonialism because it's a voluntary military alliance that countries are joining. Okay. You say that, And it's the same as saying like, well, technically, why is the World Bank and IMF actual imperialism, a continuation of imperialism? How could you say that? Those are just financial contracts. Like what? I don't really understand it. It's still the same exact, they operate in the exact same way. If you want to think about it, if you want to understand it, just imagine if it wasn't America doing it, but like China doing it, and then you can maybe recognize that it's, you know, it's not being done with the most honest intention. Oh, yeah, just imagine it's like it's a Chinese deal.
States wouldn't like the outcome.
In 2014?
Before that. No, this was before that, after President Kuchma, Viktor Yanukovych won the elections. However, his opponents did not recognize that victory. The US supported the opposition, and the third round was scheduled. What is this? This is a coup. The US supported it, and the winner of the third round came to power. Imagine if in the US something was not to someone's liking, and the third round of election, which the US Constitution does not provide for, was organized. Nonetheless, it was done in Ukraine. Okay, Viktor Yushchenko, who was considered the
I don't support NATO. It's just realpolitik. Countries join NATO because it protects them against Putin. Yeah. No, the realpolitik is not that countries join NATO because it protects them against Putin. Well, now they do, and now they can. The realpolitik of it is the same reason why countries have signed on to the Abraham Accords. They want American weapons. That's it. And they also don't want to be an enemy of the United States of America. Because if you're an enemy of the United States of America, you don't get away with shit that Turkey does. That's kind of what he was basically describing when he's saying like, I want to deal with you guys. I want to deal positively. We're bourgeois as well. Look at us. We're a bourgeois democracy. We liberalized our markets. That's what it is. Look at Turkey. You know what I mean?
The pro-Western politician came to power. Fine, we have built relations with him as well. He came to Moscow with visits. We visited Kiev. I visited too. We met in an informal setting. If he's pro-Western, so be it. It's fine. Let people do their job. The situation should have developed inside independent Ukraine itself. As a result of Kuchma's leadership, things got worse and Viktor Yanukovych came to power after all. Maybe he wasn't the best president and politician. I don't know. I don't want to give assessments.
You are not beating the Russia allegations?
However, the issue of the association with the EU came up. We have always been lenient to this. Suit yourself. But when we read through the Treaty of Association, it turned out to be a problem for us, since we had a free trade zone and open customs borders with Ukraine, which under this association had to open its borders for Europe, which could have led to flooding of our market. We said, no, this is not going to work. We shall close our borders with Ukraine then. The customs borders, that is. Yanukovych started to calculate how much Ukraine was going to gain, how much to lose, and said to his European partners, I need more time to think before signing. The moment he said that, the opposition began to take destructive steps which were supported by the West. It all came down to Maidan and a coup in Ukraine.
So he did more trade with Russia than with the EU. Ukraine did.
Of course. It's not even the matter of trade volume, although for the most part it is.
Look at Turkey. What? Turkey has its whole eastern border being destabilized by NATO. Nobody's taking anything easy on Turkey for being in NATO. What do you mean? Turkey gets to fucking literally overtake the northern Syrian corridor without a single fucking peep from Western media. Why is that the case? Because Incirlik is a fucking nuclear armed, is an American base with nuclear arms on it. The fuck do you mean? Also, partially the reason why Erdogan gets to talk a big game about how like, oh, Israel this, Israel that, all this shit. While simultaneously, there's literal Turkey's doing that to Syria despite NATO? Yeah, you're ridiculous if you think that Turkey's position as a NATO nation doesn't play a role in America not coming down hard on Turkey. Isn't it odd that only NATO-aligned nations are able to engage in such actions? The fuck do you mean? As long as you are an ally to the United States of America, you get away with whatever the fuck you want. You have childlike politics. If you personally do not recognize that, your politics are silly if you don't recognize it. Also, what NATO did in Turkey, ironically identical to what it did in, also aligning, propping up ultra-nationalist fascists like the Grey Wolves against the socialists, the trade unionists, and the communists in Turkey. Okay, that's another mark for my anti-NATO perspective. Okay. Like these ultra nationalist fascists that have also been prominent and propped up the Erdogan regime with their coalition. There's a direct through line. There's a direct through line there between NATO involvement in Turkey, obviously nuclear bases being set up, missiles pointing directly on the USSR soil, the Cuban Missile Crisis, all the way to Recep Tayyip Erdogan being able to do whatever the fuck he wants in the region because he's a part of NATO. It's not an accident after the 700th time that America aligns with fascists in their endless endeavor to eradicate socialism.
It is the matter of cooperation ties, which the entire Ukrainian economy was based on. The cooperation ties between the enterprises were very close since the times of the Soviet Union. One enterprise there used to produce components to be assembled both in Russia and Ukraine and vice versa. They used to be very close ties. A coup d'etat was committed, although I shall not delve into details now, as I find doing it inappropriate, the US told us. Calm Yanukovych down, and we will calm the opposition. Let the situation unfold in the scenario of a political settlement. We said, all right, agreed, let's do it this way. As the Americans requested, Yanukovych did use neither the armed forces nor the police, yet the armed opposition committed a coup in Kiev. What is that supposed to mean? Who do you think you are? I wanted to ask the then US leadership.
With the backing of whom?
With the backing of CIA, of course. The organization you wanted to join back in the day, as I understand. We should thank God they didn't let you.
Oh! Yo! He's right. Tucker Carlson's dad is CIA, by the way. Voice of America. God damn. Got his ass. Tucker Carlson's dad is literally CIA. Tucker Carlson wanted to join the CIA. That's crazy that Vladimir Putin just dropped that in the...
With the backing of CIA, of course. The organization you wanted to join back in the day, as I understand. We should thank God they didn't let you in. Although, it is a serious organization. I understand.
That's so funny. Yanukovych's Berkut forces literally shot and killed over 100 people in my
former vis-a-vis in the sense that I served in the first main directorate, Soviet Union's intelligence service. They have always been our opponents. A job is a job. Technically, they did everything right. They achieved their goal of changing the government. However, from political standpoint, it was a colossal mistake. Surely it was political leadership's miscalculation. They should have seen what it would evolve into. So, in 2008, the doors of NATO were open for Ukraine. In 2014, there was a coup. They started persecuting those who did not accept the coup, and it was indeed a coup. They created a threat to Crimea, which we had to take under our protection.
Dude, Russia saying they have to come in and involve themselves in Ukraine because, like, they're being undemocratic to the Russian, like, to the ethnic Russians in the Eastern territories is so funny because it's literally America shit. Okay? It is identical to America shit. It's like America being like, yeah, we're going to Afghanistan because they're not treating gay people right. It's what Israel does about their defense of their ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. Straight up. And no, for those of you who are dense as I know there's a lot of people who are horny to like cut anything and everything I say here that even comes across as like even remotely pro-Putin as like a yet another instance where I'm dick riding Putin or some shit. I'm not saying that that's good, okay? I'm saying that that's bad. I'm using America shit in a way that is bad, okay? Objectively bad. It's kind of funny saying it's America shit when Russia has been doing this before white people walked in NA. Yes, but I say it's America shit because obviously in the way that we understand contemporary politics, it's America that does that, okay? It is a continuation of obviously the oldest colonial trick in the book, which is we are civilizing the barbarians, right? The indigenous forces that we must wipe out and enslave deserve or are worthy of the civilizing force of colonial, the supreme colonial cultures. That's the same thing. When I say America shit, I'm just talking about the same exact continuation of that policy, of that principle. Like Tibet, yes, dude. Yes, you're right. Tibetan like actual Tibetan slaves joining the revolutionary forces is identical to the colonial violence and the enslavement of an indigenous population. Thank you. No, there are differences between a feudal population and the subjects of said feudal population joining the revolutionary forces to abolish the feudal slave-like conditions that they existed under versus a barbaric indigenous population, which, by the way, yes, they had practices that were violent, of course, in tribes and whatnot, getting brutalized in infinitely worse ways by an outside alien superpower. Apparently, Moscow was on fire right now during the release of this interview. Wait, what? Multiple fires being reported in Moscow? Hashtag Tucker Putin? I don't believe that. No, this seems like fucking fake news to me. It's 31. It's got 31 likes. That seems fucking bullshit.
Action. They launched the war in Donbass in 2014 with the use.
Brother, check your mouth. Not all indigenous nations were openly violent. No, man. That's why I said, yes, certainly there were violent practices in indigenous populations, but that does not mean that it was justifiable to enslave all of them. You are so silly. I did not say what you think I said. Just really take a breather before you get
Use of
mad.
aircraft and artillery against civilians.
Huh.
This is when it all started. There's a video of aircraft attacking Donetsk from above. They launched a large-scale military operation, then another one. When they failed, they started to prepare the next one. All this against the background of military development of this territory and opening of NATO's doors. How could we not express concern over what was happening? From our side, this would have been a culpable negligence. That's what it would have been.
Why so many folks on our dick today? Because I'm watching a massive interview with Vladimir Putin and Tucker Carlson. And there's going to be a lot of like Ukraine watchers who are very hawkish towards me that used to be former fans who then got like, who I was probably very mean to, if I'm being real, leading up to Russia invading Ukraine in a very snarky way, to which I've apologized since then for getting it wrong and even being snarky about getting it wrong, but they haven't given up. It's been 2 years and they still have not let go. They will not let go forever, I'm pretty sure. So they mostly just come in here to look for any and every opportunity that they can claim that I'm actually very much pro-Putin to keep that love affair alive in their own circles. Whereas if they genuinely listened to what I had to say, they would understand that I'm anti-NATO for sure. I've never, I've never missed words on that, but certainly even more anti-Putin. The Moscow fires are real. That's crazy. Of course, that big, like, there was a big split during the Sam Harris Cenk Uyghur 3-hour debate many years prior amongst the progressive left, where there were people who were like, no, I'm actually Islamophobic and it's perfectly valid to be Islamophobic, okay, versus the Cenk Uyghur coalition of the left at the time, the online left, the online progressive movement, that was like, no, I think we should be like more understanding of Muslim populations and not engage in like such severe acts of violence and destabilization upon them. I think that in my community, a similar split happened in the Russian invasion of Ukraine, where a lot of people that were like, oh no, you're fucking totally wrong and you were an asshole to me. A lot of those people basically became like complete aligned with the United States of America, no matter what they do, with some deviations every now and then, like, but reluctantly pro-American imperialism. Not you, just leftist media in general. I'm so tired of being called a tanky. Yeah. To my shame, I was in the Harris camp back then. I know better now. Yeah. Ironic, because a lot of people who used to be in the Harris camp then turned around from the Sam Harris Islamophobia camp that were anti-Trump for a very long time, looked at what was going on in Ukraine and like kind of took on another more reactionary position that like America reluctantly has to keep being violent and engage in acts of imperialism, that kind of thing. And now that Yeah, now they call me a terrorist for interviewing a Yemeni kid who they fucking obviously call a terrorist, an anti-Semite, a slaver, and numerous other things. Still to this day, in spite of the fact that he is none of those things at all. They were very mad that I humanized a person from Yemen when America was blowing up positions inside of Yemen. Oh, and a son of an oligarch as well, which is really funny. But yeah, to answer your question in the most long-winded, convoluted way possible, I think those are the reasons. But once again, I have to ask for charitability as always. Be charitable. Don't be motivated by what you have watched as far as like videos that other content creators have made of me. As long as you are willing to learn my position, I will always tell you. I'm honest to a fault in that regard. I don't hide it. I will tell you always, which is why so many people simultaneously hold the position that like I'm doing this to be popular, while also they recognize that it is a deeply unpopular position to hold. Yeah, all the drama lefty said you're pro-terrorist. I know.
It's just that the US political leadership pushed us to the line we could not cross, because doing so could have ruined Russia itself. Besides, we could not leave our brothers in faith, in fact, a part of Russian people, in the face of this war machine.
What was but that was 8 years before the current conflict started. So what was the trigger for you? What was the moment where you decided you had to do this?
We'll get to Biden talking in the White House in like 15 minutes, okay? Once again, though, to all my haters that are in here, I love you, okay? I do. And I hope that one day you will understand my position. Why are you triggered? Wait, what? I'm not triggered. Why am I triggered?
Initially, it was the coup in Ukraine that provoked the conflict. By the way, back then the representatives of 3 European countries, Germany, Poland, and France, arrived.
Biden's trying to steal Pootie Poo's thunder.
They were the guarantors of the signed agreement between the government of Yanukovych and the opposition. They signed it as guarantors. Despite that, the opposition committed a coup, and all these countries pretended that they didn't remember that they were guarantors of the peaceful settlement. They just threw it in the stove right away, and nobody recalls that.
Ukraine is also a neo-imperialist counter-revolutionary project propped up specifically to prevent socialism from spreading in Eastern Europe. Russia is literally acting in self-defense. Putin represents the last bastion for the dictatorship of the proletariat. Is so funny because one, he literally started this interview and even his like invasion of Ukraine by shitting on Lenin. Okay. And even in this interview, like 20 minutes in, he was like, we're bourgeois. We're a bourgeois democracy. We liberalized our markets. Why are you guys not letting us kill Muslims? Just like you, we want to kill Muslims alongside you. Please give us money to kill Muslims instead of trying to kill us with this NATO shit. Okay. So the idea that like, dude, it's so sick. Yeah. Vladimir Putin, the eminent upholder of proletarian dictatorship. The only thing he's upholding is the dictatorship part of that, but certainly not at the behest of the proletarian, and more so for what he is, which is an oligarch, and definitely firmly within you know, in the context of being a capitalist. It's a joke? Oh, okay.
I don't know if the US know anything about the agreement between the opposition and the authorities, and its 3 guarantors who, instead of bringing this whole situation back in the political field, supported the coup. Although it was meaningless, believe me. Because President Yanukovych agreed to all conditions, he was ready to hold an early election which he had no chance of winning, frankly speaking. Everyone knew that. Then why the coup? Why the victims? Why threatening Crimea? Why launching an operation in Donbass? This I do not understand. That is exactly what the miscalculation is. CIA did its job to complete the coup. I think one of the deputy secretaries of state said that it cost a large sum of money, almost 5 billion. But the political mistake was colossal. Why would they have to do that? All this could have been done legally, without victims, without military action, without losing Crimea.
That's pretty funny. He's like, dude, come on, dog. I can't believe the CIA did military actions in Ukraine. Yeah, all of this could have been done without any deaths is like a really funny thing to say when, you know, you've been pummeling Ukraine, just destroying Eastern Ukraine. Still, all this shit is USA's fault. No, USA involvement only goes as far as like the moment that Russia invaded Ukraine. It is entirely, and I've said this time and time again, it is entirely Russia's fault after that moment. America can continue its interest in pilfering Ukraine, okay, in its weakest moment, keep whispering sweet nothings to the Ukrainians that they are going to permanently support them when they don't have that same interest, especially when, you know, another ally is all of a sudden more important because they're doing some genocide, a quick genocide on the side. Okay. But overall, there are a lot of viewers in here who 100% think Putin is right to attack because NATO US triggered it. Yeah, I don't think that. And I have said this since day one, and I make fun of those people all the time. But you might not know that because maybe you're not in here all the time. I routinely joke about people who push Z or the MAGA communists. I know there's a Biden speech, chat. I know. We're waiting on it. It's not live yet. So what would you have Putin do other than invade NATO after repeatedly cross Russian red lines? Not saying he's right. He already annexed Crimea. What are you talking about? It's Jover. He annexed Crimea. There is no world in which he actually has to fucking invade Ukraine. It's ridiculous. He knows that the Western forces are never going to expand and allow Ukraine into NATO. He knows that. He already took parts of Ukraine, especially parts that are mostly occupied with Russian people in general, because of a prior Russification and relocation of the indigenous Tatar population. Okay. There's literally a Russian base there already. How'd you stop him? So you'd have him annex LPR and DPR without invading? How? No, you don't annex LPR and DPR at all. At all. Like, people say that Vladimir Putin invaded eastern Ukraine because of 20,000 mostly ethnic Russians died in LPR and DPR. No, that's just a Putin justification for it. That's ridiculous. How many fucking ethnic Russians have died since then? What are you talking about? Yeah, dude, that was a really good tactical moment for Vladimir Putin. He really saved a lot of ethnic Russian lives in eastern Ukraine when he invaded Ukraine. Come on, dude. I think personally that he greatly miscalculated, maybe due to how easy it was to dominate Ukraine in 2014, when its military prowess was and its military equipment was significantly, I mean, it was nothing in comparison to what it is now. And they were wrong. They were not able to maintain air superiority. They bombed the shit out of even Western positions, and they failed. He thought that he could do it. He thought he could annex it, which I literally think was impossible regardless. Okay. It was a massive misstep. It was a massive failure. There's a reason why European countries are still very much purchasing Russian gas, for example, through secondary markets. You could have just kept your fucking head down and kept dealing with your European trade partners and just didn't have to engage in like weird hyper nationalistic shit for the purpose of, I guess, like, I don't know, galvanizing patriotic support, not getting outflanked by even more nationalist forces within your country. Or maybe because you personally genuinely believe in the fucking hyper nationalist mentality that like Ukraine belongs to Russia. That much seemingly is true. I mean, he's basically saying it. It shows that war against more evenly matched countries, firepower, not manpower, ends up in a standstill. We're too used for big countries attacking smaller and weaker ones. No, because no, you don't understand. If Ukraine was not armed in any way by the UN, or not UN, sorry, by NATO, by America, by Western forces, Vladimir Putin would still not be able to permanently annex the country. This has been my position since day one. That is oftentimes people point to that one tweet about me saying like Vladimir Putin is bad, not mad. He would never invade Ukraine. That would be a fucking major foolish decision. Remember, I never deleted that tweet on purpose because the part that people literally forget is why I said that, which is because it would be impossible for Vladimir Putin to engage in a counterinsurgency. It would destroy Russia, even without even without arms being funneled into Ukraine by the thousands, by the billions of dollars worth, okay, old equipment or not, you cannot go against a country with 44 million people in it that have nowhere else to fucking go, that are not going to sit there idly and take it. That's the reason why he was like, oh, it's a special operation. Fuck no, it wasn't a special operation at all. You are wrong twice, actually. He did invade and it yet hasn't destroyed Russia. Brother, if you think that this is a... If you think that the invasion of Ukraine has been a W for either side, you are huffing on maximum amounts of copium. It obviously is a standstill and the counteroffensive failed in the way that the American government and the Western media presented it at first. It never came to be. Ukraine has hemorrhaged combatants. Russia also has hemorrhaged combatants in this process by a significant chunk. It comes down to a major Russian intelligence failure, which believes there would be far less Ukrainian resistance and far more support among ethnic Russians, which wasn't the case. Yes, I think that they maybe thought that it would be like Crimea, which was ridiculous. I always point to Kharkiv as a great example of an area that was more pro-Russian pre-invasion due to Russian sympathy and ethnically Russian people living there. And look at it now. Ain't nobody is fucking pro-Russia after their entire existence is wiped out, after their homes are wiped out, after their fucking apartment complexes are reduced to rubble. You're not going to be pro-Russia at that point. Ethnic Russian is such a misleading term. Many Russian-speaking cities are mostly pro-Ukrainian. Look at Carlson. Yeah, I don't know how else to communicate that point. Like more sympathetic to Russia. There were areas in eastern Ukraine that are more sympathetic to Russia. The further east you go in Ukraine, the more people used to be sympathetic to Russia. This doesn't mean that they wanted to be invaded by Russia or anything like that. Okay? Clearly, they did not want to be invaded by Russia. They are now invaded by Russia, and look at them. They are not pro-Russia at all. Like, I'm not saying that they wanted to be liberated by the glorious Vladimir Putin. That's not what I'm saying at all. The point I was basically making is that even those areas that I think Vladimir Putin thought he would be able to easily annex similar to Crimea, he was not going to be able to do so. I'm ethnically Russian hardly makes any sense, because if we're getting into the history like Putin, there are a fuck ton of ethnic groups that aren't in the Russian ethnic group but are native to the land. Yeah. I don't know what the proper way to communicate that would be. To be fair, it doesn't matter what they think. I know people in Mariupol who were pro-Ukraine, but Russia pushed Azov shit in, and now the people are pro-Russia. It's just power imposition. Yeah, okay, dude. Come on. I'm not missing the Biden speech. He's not live yet. Anyway. Yeah, you're convincing me now that this whole thing was a justification to flush out ethnic and political groups not aligned with Putin and solidify his position in nationalistic fervor of those left. Now, I think internally, maybe Putin was a little worried about being outflanked from the right, from other ultra-nationalist forces, but I don't really know. I feel like he's got that shit on lock. But his justifications for invading Ukraine were fraught. It was fraudulent. There is no real justification for invading Ukraine. And I think a lot of people personally that claim that, like, oh, he did it to, like, defend Donbass or whatever, are wrong. Like, that's ridiculous. It's like when America says we have to go and invade a place because they're killing women there or something. You know, it's just fucking bullshit. That previous dude is simply wrong. Ukraine destroyed a huge percentage of the Russian army. By the way, for the counteroffensive, you might have heard this somewhere, but NATO U.S. generals told Ukraine to attack in one direction with most of the force being there, but Zelensky was against that, and he decided to do it all across in the front in Zaporizhia, Donetsk, Luhansk, and Kharkiv. This is one of the generals why Zelensky was fired. Okay. I am at the 50th minute on the interview. We'll keep going until Biden goes on.
We would have never considered to even lift a finger if it hadn't been for the bloody developments on Maidan. Because we agreed with the fact that after the collapse of the Soviet Union, our borders should be along the borders of former Union's republics. We agreed
My
to
Bourbon
that.
Gamer, thank you for the 5
We never agreed to NATO's expansion, and moreover, we never agreed that Ukraine would be in NATO. We did not agree to NATO bases there without any discussion with us. For decades, we kept asking, don't do this, don't do that. And what triggered the latest events? Firstly, the current Ukrainian leadership declared that it would not implement the Minsk agreements, which had been signed, as you know, after the events of 2014 in Minsk, where the plan of peaceful settlement in Donbass was set forth. But no, the current Ukrainian leadership, foreign minister, all other officials, and then president himself said that they don't like anything about the Minsk agreements. In other words, they were not going to implement it. A year or a year and a half ago, former leaders of Germany and France said openly to the whole world that they indeed signed the Minsk agreements, but they never intended to implement them. They simply led us by the nose.
Was there anyone for you to talk to? Did you call a U.S. President, Secretary of State and say, if you keep militarizing Ukraine with NATO forces, this is going to we're going to act?
By the way, here's why this is like pure, unadulterated pro-Putin propaganda hour from Tucker. Notice how every single time, including like in the first 30 minutes where Putin was like talking about fucking, I don't know, the history of how every Ukrainian is technically Russian in real life or whatever, he kept trying to bring the conversation back to rails in a way that is like more appropriate for Western audience consumption. That's basically what he's doing every single time he feels like Putin is deviating away. Like he straight up said, okay, but let's talk about NATO. You invaded Ukraine because of NATO, right? While he literally was like, everyone in Ukraine is actually Russian. And I think that we will liberate the glorious Russians that live in Ukraine. He's like, no, but NATO, right? Like NATO. Is there no one that you could talk to in America? What's going on? It's kind of awesome. I won't lie. It's kind of awesome that he gets to be so patriotic, quote unquote, while eating Russia's dick so hard, Putin's dick so hard. I wish I could do that.
Today